Our objective in this lesson is to add and subtract fractions. The first few examples we're going to do are already going to have a common denominator. So all we're going to need to do is add or subtract the numerators. So if you notice, our rules for addition of fractions and subtraction are here. Notice that they are showing that the denominators need to be the same. They need to be in common. And then you would just add the numerators. Same thing for subtraction. You need to find a common denominator and then you just subtract the numerators. So if you look at the examples over here, I have 2/9 plus 5/9. They already have a common denominator of 9. So I'm going to leave the 9 alone. And then I'm just going to add the numerators. 2 plus 5, and I get 7. My fraction is already simplified, so I don't need to reduce it. For subtraction, we're going to do the same thing. We need to make sure we have a common denominator. Once we have a common denominator, we will subtract the numerators. And here I'll do 4 minus 1, you get 3, and it's already simplified. So let's try a couple of examples. Here is example A. Notice the denominator is 16 on both fractions. So on this one, all I need to do is add the numerators. So 3c plus 5c, and I end up with 8c. I do not add the numerators. I keep the denominator. I don't add the denominators. I leave it the same. Now, if when you're done adding or subtracting, if this fraction can be simplified, you need to reduce it. So notice I can simplify the numerical part. 8 over 16 will simplify to 1/2. I don't need to write the 1. Final answer here is going to be c over 2. For part B, now this one's a little tricky. You need to be careful. Just like before when we subtracted the polynomials, remember we did like a keep, change, flip or a stay, change, change. This subtraction sign needs to distribute to each one of the terms in the second fraction. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to keep my first fraction the same. I'm going to change this subtraction sign to an addition sign, and then I'm going to change each one of these numerator signs to opposite. Now I can add my like terms from the numerator. So 5x plus negative 3x, and I end up with 2x. And then 4 plus 8, and I get 12. And then the denominator stays the same. Now I need to check it and make sure that it's simplified. Notice in the numerator, I can factor out a GCF of 2. So when I divide out the 2, I'm left with x plus 6 over 10. And then I can still simplify a little bit more. I can reduce the 2/10 and make this 1/5. So my final answer here is x plus 6 over 5. For the next example, again, this is the work for here. So that was example 1. Let's try example 2. Notice in example 2A, they already have a common denominator, so all I need to do is add the numerators. So here, 3 plus 1 is 4 over x plus 4. Remember, this x plus 4 is attached, because remember the fraction bar is like a grouping symbol. I cannot cancel out the 4's, so my final answer is this, because that 4 in the denominator is attached to the x. Now, for the next example, notice they sort of look the same, however the signs are backwards. So what I'm going to do on the second fraction is I'm going to factor out a GCF of -1. Then the denominators will be in common. So 2 over x minus 3. And over here, 7 over, and if I divide out a -1 GCF, now, and then I could move the negative sign to the top. Or actually, let me leave it there, so then I could do this. So then my denominators look the same. So 2 over x minus 3 plus -7 over x minus 3. I have the same denominators, so now I can just add my numerators. And I get -5 over x minus 3. Now, what we can do here is remember this -5 in the top, or we can just write the negative sign out front of the fraction. That's generally how you're going to see it, is this answer. All right, I think what I'm going to do is stop here, and then I'm going to start up again tomorrow with example 3 with finding now a common denominator. So what you can do is you can do the homework for 6-4. That is your official homework tonight. It's due tomorrow morning. The first few examples that we saw yesterday already had a common denominator. It wasn't until we got to example 2b where the denominators, they looked similar, but they weren't in common yet. And in order to make the x minus 3 and the 3 minus x the same, I had to factor out a GCF or multiply everything by -1 in order to make it in common. So that's how we ended up getting a common denominator, or at least LCD, of x minus 3. Now, in our example 3, this is going to be the first one that we're going to encounter that the denominators are totally different. So for this one, I'm going to look at 4 and 18. Now, you can either break it down into primes, or you can probably do like you probably did in 4th or 5th grade, where you just listed the multiples until you found one that was in common. So if I wanted to first start listing my multiples of 4 and 18, I don't like to get too far out, so I like to sort of do a little bit of both. So here, 4 times 1, 4 times 2, 3. I could also do the 18. 18 times 1 is 18. 18 times 2 is 36. Now, if everybody realizes they're 4 times tables, we know that 4 times 9, I could keep going, is also 36. So my common multiple here for this one is going to be 36. So now, in this lesson, not only are we finding a common denominator, but now we also have to add and subtract the numerators. So I'm going to change the first fraction, the a over 4, and I'm going to change it so it has a common denominator of, or an LCD of 36. So what am I going to multiply 4 by to make it 36? And that's going to be 9. And whatever you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator. So this will become 9a. So my new fraction for this with the LCD is going to be 9a over 36. Then the second fraction, I got to figure out what am I going to multiply 18 by to make it become 36. And then whatever I do to the denominator, I'm also going to do to the numerator. So 5 plus 12a. Notice I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 2. So the 18 turns into 36. When I multiply the numerator, I need to distribute the 2 to the 5 and the 12a. So my new fraction here is going to become 10 plus 24a. And it has the common denominator of 36. Now, you have to be careful on the subtraction problems, just like we did with the polynomials. We're going to do like a keep, flip, change. Or we need to remember to distribute the subtraction sign to all of the terms in the numerator. So this subtraction sign needs to go to the 10 and to the 24. So I'm going to rewrite my problem. I'm going to leave the 9a alone. I'm going to change the 10 to negative, and then the 24 and make it negative. Bless you. And then it all has the common denominator of 36. Now I can go back and I can group my like terms. I have two A like terms on the top. So 9 minus 24A, and that's going to give me negative 15A. Nothing to group with the 10, so rewrite it over 36. Now, just like we learned in the other lesson, we need to reduce this. So I can simplify this fraction. I can factor the numerator. I'm going to pull out a negative 5, and then I'm going to be left with 3A plus 2 over 36. And if you want to put the negative sign in front of the fraction, you can. Now, you should always factor it to make sure that there's nothing that's going to cancel. In this particular problem, nothing simplifies, so this is my final answer. In this particular problem, since nothing canceled, you could have left it like this. But you always need to factor it to double check that to see if something's going to cancel. Let's go ahead and try this tie into geometry. Now, for perimeter of a rectangle or any shaped perimeter, you're adding up all the sides. But in this particular case, they're going to tell us that in the case of a rectangle, that this side and this side are the same. So they're going to times both the length and the width by 2 in order to figure out this problem. So what we're going to do here is 2 times the length, and the length is going to be a minus 1 over 4 plus 2 times the width, which is just the a over 12. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify this. And I could actually simplify diagonally here and make this a 2. So a minus 1 over 2. Simplify this, make this a 6. So a over 6. Now at this point, I need to find a common denominator between 2 and 6. And my common denominator here is going to be 6. So now I have to figure out what am I going to multiply 2 by to make it become 6. And I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 3. Again, remember you're going to distribute that 3 to the top there. This one I need to multiply it by 1, which is nothing, so it's going to stay the same. So now at the top, you need to distribute and then combine like terms. So 3 times a, 3 times negative 1. And then I have the plus a, and the whole thing is over 6. Now I need to combine my like terms. So 3a plus 1a is 4a minus 3 over 6. I can't factor anything out of that numerator, so I'm going to stop. I can't cancel the 3 and the 6 because remember this is attached. And the only way I could simplify that is if the 6 down here had an a with it. So I cannot simplify anything, so I am done. This is my final answer. Let's try another one. So again, I'm going to look at my denominators. I need to find a common denominator for 2x and 8x squared. Now, for the numerical part, what would be my LCD or LCM for 2 and 8? Anybody know? 8. Good. What about the variables? What's going to be the x for the LCD? X to the what power? When you're doing LCD, pick the biggest exponent. So out of the 2 that I have, I'm picking the x squared. So 8x squared is going to be my common denominator. So what do I need to multiply 2x by to make it turn into 8x squared? 4x. Good. And whatever you do to the bottom, we're going to do to the top. So let me go ahead and add these tops in here. So this was a 3. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 4x. And my new numerator is going to become 12x. For the bottom fraction here, let me add in my numerator. It was a 1. So notice here nothing changed. So I'm just going to put the 1 back. So now I'm going to go ahead and do this problem. It's going to be with the new numerator. The newly renamed fraction is going to be 12x over 8x squared and minus 1. On this one, nothing factors out. I cannot simplify the 12x and the 8x squared because remember again that that fraction bar is a grouping symbol, so nothing cancels here and you're done. The next one, we're going to factor it, not just look to see what's missing. So for number 6, I need to figure out what this factors into and what this one factors into. So this one, I can only factor out a GCF of A. This one I can factor, it's the difference of two squares. So A minus 2 and A plus 2. So now remember, when you're looking for a common denominator, everything needs to be represented. So notice I need to include in my answer the A. I need to include an A minus 2. And then also the A plus 2. So this is going to be my common denominator. And I'm going to go ahead and write it next to each one so I can see what's missing from it. So the first fraction is A minus 3 over A parenthesis A minus 2. So you can see that what you need to multiply this one by, or what is missing, is the A plus 2. So you've added it into the denominator. So I'm also going to put it up here in the top. And then the A plus 3 that was there, A minus 3. So that's the renamed first fraction. The second fraction, this one, I need to, let me just write it over here to the side, A minus 4. I'm going to write it in the factored form, A minus 2A plus 2. And now we're going to see what's missing. So my common denominator is A times A minus 2, A plus 2. So if I take a look over here to see what's missing, you can see that the only thing it's going to is missing is the A. So that's what I'm going to multiply the numerator by. So now it's got the common denominator with the newly renamed fraction. So now I can do the subtraction. So now I need to actually FOIL and distribute so I can combine my like terms. So for this first fraction, I need to distribute or FOIL the numerator. So I'm going back to the multiplying. So I'm going to do A minus 3, A plus 2. I'm going to FOIL it. First, outside, inside, and last, group your middles, and this gives you A squared minus A minus 6. So that's going to be my new numerator for the first one. Let me write it over here. A squared minus A minus 6. Over here I'm going to distribute this one, A squared and minus 4A. And then they all have the A minus 2, the A plus 2. Now I need to combine all of my like terms in the numerator. So notice here when I try to group the A squareds, they're actually going to cancel because A squared minus A squared is gone. I'm going to try to group the negative A and the negative 4A. And let's see here. Oh, wait, I made a mistake here. Anybody catch what I forgot to do? This was a subtraction problem. I needed to distribute the negative sign to everything. So over here, I was subtracting this fraction here. So this needed to become a negative a squared, and a positive 4a squared. So now I'm going to group these, negative a plus 4a, and that's going to give me 3a. And then nothing to group with the 6, so I put the minus 6. Still has this denominator. I don't need to FOIL it. The denominator, you're not going to FOIL or multiply. You're always just going to leave it factored. Now, after you've combined your like terms, now you need to factor out a GCF out of the top and then see if anything will cancel. So out of this numerator, I could factor out a 3, and I'm left with a minus 2. Let me write in the bottom. And now I'm going to look for things that I could simplify. The only thing I can simplify are the a minus 2's because they're grouped. And then my final answer here is 3 over a parenthesis a plus 2. And you can leave it factored like that. You do not need to distribute it at the end. Everybody good? Any questions? Remember to distribute whenever it's a subtraction problem. Remember to distribute the subtraction sign to all of the terms in the numerator. Don't forget that. Otherwise, you're going to get the wrong answer. Let me try one more example from this to show you one more practice, I guess. All right, let me try one of these oral exercises. Let's just try 16 here. I know it's kind of simple though. So my common denominator between n and n squared is going to be n squared. It's always the larger exponent. So for the 5 over n, to make it become an n squared, notice you're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by n. So the new fraction here is going to be 5n over n squared. And then over here, 4 over n squared is already the same. So you're leaving that one alone. So the problem you're going to do is 5n minus 4 over n squared. And then notice on this one, nothing to simplify, nothing cancels, so you're done. Homework tonight is going to be 2 through 58 even, but you're going to skip numbers 32 and 34. So that's your homework for tonight. Again, you're finding a common denominator here when you're doing these. And then you're adding and subtracting the renamed fractions, the new numerators. And then after you've combined your like terms, you need to always reduce the fraction and see if anything will simplify. And that is it. That is lesson 6.6. That is 6.5. So do this homework. And again, we'll go over these answers. And then tomorrow, it's more of the same. However, we are going to be adding mixed expressions where we're going to be adding it to a whole number. And remember, to turn a whole number into a fraction, you would add a 1 to the denominator, but then you're still finding a common denominator.